For over 5,000 years, one plant has shaped empires, fueled economies, devastated communities, and sparked some of the most controversial conspiracies in history. This is the evolution of cocaine, from the sacred coca leaves of the Incas to a global multi-billion-dollar industry. Long before cocaine became a street drug or a government scandal, it was a sacred plant. Indigenous Andean tribes in present-day Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia were the first to cultivate Erythroxylum coca. This hardy plant thrives in the high-altitude, humid slopes of the Andes, growing best between 1,500 to 6,000 feet above sea level. For the Incas, chewing coca leaves wasn't about getting high. It was about survival. The leaves contained alkaloids that reduced fatigue, hunger, and altitude sickness. The Inca elite and their warriors used it as a divine gift from their gods. But it wouldn't stay a local secret for long. Fast forward to the mid-19th century, European scientists became obsessed with unlocking the coca plant's potential. In 1859, German chemist Albert Niemann successfully extracted its active alkaloid and named it cocaine. The world had just met one of the most powerful stimulants ever discovered. By the late 1800s, cocaine wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated. It was used to treat depression, morphine addiction, and even toothaches. Sigmund Freud himself became one of its biggest advocates, calling it a magical substance. And then came Coca-Cola. In 1886, Atlanta pharmacist John Stith Pemberton created Coca-Cola, an energy-boosting drink originally infused with cocaine. Sold as a medicinal tonic, it quickly became a massive success. But it wasn't alone. Cocaine was in everything from wines like Vin Mariani to over-the-counter lozenges and cough syrups. But as the world learned, cocaine had a dark side. By the early 20th century, cases of addiction, psychosis, and overdoses were rising. Governments began to take action. The Harrison Narcotics Act of 1914 was the first major law to regulate cocaine in the U.S., restricting its sale to medical use only. By the 1920s, it was considered a dangerous drug, with widespread bans across the world. But prohibition never means elimination. Instead, it created a thriving black market. Cocaine moved from pharmacy shelves to criminal networks, fueling the rise of organized crime in the 20th century. To turn coca leaves into powdered cocaine, the process is labor-intensive and chemically complex. Here's how it works. Harvesting. Farmers hand-pick coca leaves and dry them. Processing. The dried leaves are soaked in gasoline or kerosene, which extracts the cocaine alkaloid. Purification. The alkaloid is then mixed with sulfuric acid, sodium carbonate, and ammonia to create a cocaine base. Crystallization. The base is then dissolved in acetone or ether, followed by filtering and drying, yielding pure, powdered cocaine hydrochloride. In the early 1980s, a new, cheap, smokable version of cocaine emerged: crack. Unlike powdered cocaine, which was expensive and primarily used by the wealthy, crack was designed for mass consumption. It provided an intense, short-lived high, leading to a rapid cycle of addiction. The process of making crack is relatively simple, but chemically effective. Here's how it works. 1. Dissolution. Powdered cocaine is dissolved in a mixture of baking soda and water. 2. Heating. The solution is heated until the water evaporates, leaving behind an oily residue. 3. Formation. The residue begins to harden into small white or yellowish solid chunks, known as crack rocks. 4. Cooling and drying. Once cooled, the substance hardens into smokable doses, easy to break apart and distribute. Unlike snorted or injected cocaine, which delivers a longer-lasting high, smoking crack sends the drug directly to the lungs, producing an almost immediate rush. The intense euphoria lasts only 5–15 minutes, leading to repeated use and a cycle of craving, withdrawal, and relapse. The affordability and rapid effects of crack led to an explosion in use, especially in low-income, inner-city neighborhoods. The drug flooded American cities, creating a crisis that would soon be met with one of the most controversial government crackdowns in U.S. history. But where did all this crack cocaine come from? Who was truly behind its distribution? Some believe the answer lies deep within the corridors of power. A conspiracy theory that connects crack cocaine to covert government operations, CIA-backed drug trafficking, and Cold War geopolitics. For those who seek the most immediate and intense effects, injecting cocaine directly into the bloodstream delivers an almost instantaneous high, with effects peaking in seconds and lasting about 15 to 30 minutes. However, this method also carries the highest risk of overdose, infection, and long-term health complications. Injecting cocaine is not new. By the late 1800s, medical professionals experimented with intravenous cocaine for pain relief, surgery, and psychiatric treatment. But as recreational use surged, so did the dangers. The process of turning cocaine into an injectable form. 1. Dissolution. Powdered cocaine is mixed with sterile water or saline solution in a spoon or small cooker. 2. Heating or stirring. Some users heat the solution to fully dissolve the cocaine, while others simply stir it until it's liquid. 3. Filtering. A small cotton ball, cigarette filter, or piece of cloth is used to strain out impurities. 4. Drawing into a syringe. The liquid is drawn into a syringe and injected directly into a vein, most commonly in the arms or legs. The effects hit almost immediately, flooding the brain with dopamine, creating a rush of euphoria, heightened energy, and intense focus. However, the crash that follows is equally devastating, bringing paranoia, agitation, and severe cravings. Long-term injection use leads to collapsed veins, abscesses, and an increased risk of blood-borne diseases like HIV and hepatitis C. And because injected cocaine reaches the brain so quickly, it also drastically increases the risk of fatal overdoses and heart failure. Injecting cocaine is often linked to polydrug use, particularly mixing it with heroin in what's known as a speedball, a deadly combination that has claimed the lives of countless celebrities and everyday users alike. As addiction deepened and injection use spread, governments around the world cracked down, leading to a war on drugs that would soon take a darker turn, with allegations of government complicity in the very crisis they claimed to fight. What if the greatest drug epidemic in modern history wasn't just an accident? What if powerful organizations, not just cartels but actual governments, had a hand in the trafficking and distribution of cocaine? This isn't just speculation. It's a theory backed by leaked documents, whistleblower testimonies, and years of investigative journalism. In the 1980s, during the height of the Cold War, the U.S. government was deeply involved in funding anti-communist rebels known as the Contras in Nicaragua. But there was a problem. Congress had banned funding for these groups. This led to one of the most shocking political scandals of the 20th century, the Iran-Contra affair. The CIA allegedly allowed, or at the very least ignored, massive cocaine shipments flowing from Central America into the United States. In return, Profits from these drug sales were funneled back to fund the Contra rebels fighting against Nicaragua's socialist government. This means that at the very height of the crack epidemic, government agencies may have had direct ties to drug traffickers. In 1996, investigative journalist Gary Webb published Dark Alliance, a groundbreaking expose that connected the dots between CIA-backed rebels and the explosion of crack cocaine in Los Angeles. Webb's reporting suggested that the U.S. government allowed cocaine to flood American cities, devastating poor, primarily black communities, all in the name of Cold War politics. The response was immediate. The government denied any involvement, and mainstream media outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Los Angeles Times, launched attacks on Webb's credibility. Within a few years, Webb's career was destroyed. In 2004, he was found dead in an apparent suicide, with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Officially ruled a suicide, but many believe he was silenced. The U.S. government has long declared a war on drugs, yet evidence suggests they've played a role in both drug trafficking and mass incarceration. In the 1970s, President Richard Nixon launched the war with a clear goal: to criminalize certain communities. Years later, former Nixon aide John Ehrlichman admitted the Nixon campaign had 2 enemies: the anti-war left and black people. By heavily criminalizing drugs, we could disrupt those communities. We knew we were lying about the drugs. The result? The number of incarcerated Americans skyrocketed from 300,000 in 1980 to over 2 million today, with Black and Latino communities disproportionately targeted. Meanwhile, CIA-linked operations allegedly continued bringing cocaine into the country. The 1980s crack epidemic didn't just appear. It seemed to explode overnight, devastating inner-city communities while powdered cocaine remained the drug of choice for the wealthy. Even the sentencing laws reflected this double standard. Under the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, possessing just 5 grams of crack carried the same mandatory sentence as 500 grams of powdered cocaine, a 100.1 sentencing disparity. The result? Thousands of low-income, mostly black Americans were jailed for decades, while wealthier, white users of powdered cocaine faced lighter sentences. Many believe this wasn't a coincidence, but rather a deliberate attempt to criminalize and control certain populations while simultaneously allowing cocaine to enter the country through covert government operations. Government involvement in drug experiments isn't new. During the MKUltra program, the CIA tested powerful drugs, including LSD and stimulants, on unsuspecting U.S. citizens in an effort to develop mind control techniques. If they were willing to experiment then, why wouldn't they be involved in the cocaine trade decades later? In the Vietnam War, the U.S. military supplied methamphetamines and stimulants to soldiers to enhance performance, further proving the government's long history of manipulating drug use for strategic gain. So, did the U.S. government play a direct role in the cocaine epidemic? The official stance says no. But whistleblower testimonies, declassified documents, and investigative journalism paint a different picture, one where drug policy, covert operations, and racial injustice intersect in a way too precise to be coincidence. What began as a sacred plant has become one of the most controversial substances in history. From ancient rituals to cartels, government conspiracies, and global addiction, the evolution of cocaine is a tale of power, greed, and destruction, one that is still unfolding today. If you found this video informative, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into history's most controversial topics.